the global economy. Wow, it feels like it's constantly rewriting its own rule book, doesn't it?
It really does. You think you've grasped the main players, and then bam, the whole landscape shifts.
Exactly. And today we're diving straight into, well, a pretty big one, India. It seems India has now officially moved past Japan.
That's right. To become the world's fourth largest economy based on nominal GDP.
It's a huge milestone.
Definitely. It really underscores the momentum we've been seeing in India's economic development.
Absolutely. So to really get our heads around what this all means, we pulled together some really insightful sources.
Okay.
We've got stuff from Nexti IAS, the IBF, and also the CII India-Japan Partnership Report from this year, 2024.
Good selection.
Yeah. And our mission for this deep dive is really to understand the significant, the weight of this change, what's actually driving India's growth.
And the implications, right? Especially given the long-standing relationship with Japan.
Precisely. How might this reshape that dynamic?
Hmm.
So where do we kick off?
Let's start with the news itself. The CEO of Niti Aayog recently highlighted this milestone, India overtaking Japan.
Right.
And the figures show India's nominal GDP hitting around $4.19 trillion.
Just edging out Japan's $4.18 trillion. Wow.
Yeah. A really thin margin.
But it wasn't completely out of the blue, was it? I seem to recall Amitabh Kant, India's G20 Sherpa, predicting this might happen around 2025 anyway.
That's correct, yeah. He did suggest it was coming, and, it's worth remembering India's consistent climb.
Before this, fifth largest, overtook the UK back in 2022.
That's it. And if you zoom out further, just 10 years ago, India was, 11th globally?
11th.
Yeah, and it only recently hit that $3.7 trillion mark. So the acceleration, it's been quite something.
It really is a remarkable climb. So, okay, what are the key engines? What's fueling this economic surge?
Well, a big part is just the projected continued high growth. The IMF, for instance, they forecast India staying as the fastest growing major economy.
What kind of numbers are we talking?
They're looking at 6.2% growth in 2025 and then 6.3% in 2026.
That's pretty robust compared to many others.
It is. And you have to consider, India's GDP basically doubled since 2015 from around $2.1 trillion. So that sustained high growth is a powerful force.
And the forecasts don't stop there, do they? India isn't expected to stay at fourth place for long.
No, the projections suggest India could actually become the third largest economy by, say, 2028.
Overtaking Germany.
Potentially, yes,
Yep.
with a projected GDP maybe around $5.5 trillion. And it's interesting because Germany's own growth outlook is much lower.
How low?
Like 0% growth projected for 2025 and only 0.9% for 2026, partly down to global trade issues, tensions.
Right. So it's a mix of India's strong internal push and maybe some headwinds for other big economies.
Exactly.
Now, that next IAS article, it really digs into the specifics behind India's growth.
Yeah.
What were some of the key drivers that jumped out at you?
Well, there's several things working together. One big one is just expanding domestic consumption.
People buying more stuff.
Pretty much. Driven by private spending and notably growth in rural areas too, not just cities.
Okay.
But complementing that, you've got rapid urbanization, more people moving to cities, which generally leads to higher consumption patterns. They estimate, 600 million urban dwellers by 2030?
600 million.
Yeah.
That's a massive internal market taking shape.
It really is.
And then there's the whole demographic story, right?
Mm.
India's young population.
Precisely. The median age is around 29. That gives India this huge, potentially very productive workforce.
The demographic dividend.
Yeah, though the key challenge there, of course, is skilling and employing that workforce effectively to really capture that potential. It's not automatic.
True. But beyond just the people, it seems like strategic investments are playing a big role too.
Oh, absolutely. There's been a significant push on infrastructure and digital transformation.
What kind of infrastructure?
Modernizing transport networks,
Yeah.
energy, and crucially, digital connectivity. A really key part of this is the development of what they call digital public infrastructure, or DPI.
DPI. Okay, what does that actually mean in practice?
Think of it like the foundational digital rails. Things like unified payment systems, digital identity, stuff that makes transactions and accessing services way easier and cheaper across the country.
Ah, so it enables a lot of other economic activity.
Exactly. It's been a real catalyst. And alongside that, you've got India's booming startup scene and, of course, the continued strength of the IT sector.
And what about manufacturing? There's been a lot of talk about boosting that.
Yes, that's another critical piece of the puzzle. Initiatives like Make in India, The production-linked incentive schemes, the PLI schemes.
Right, trying to get more companies to produce goods within India.
Exactly. Attracting investment, building up domestic capabilities, and at the same time, the services sector, especially IT and financial services, just keeps performing strongly.
It also feels like India is trying to position itself cleverly on the global stage.
Definitely. Things like the China Plus One strategy, companies looking to diversify away from relying solely on China.
So India benefits from that shift.
Potentially, yes. And participating in things like the Supply Chain Resilience Initiative, the SCRI. It's all attracting more foreign direct investment, FDI, as companies look for alternative manufacturing hubs.
Any specific examples?
Well, Apple is a big one, isn't it? Really ramping up their manufacturing presence in India. That's a visible sign of this trend.
And all this growth, it's being underpinned by reforms too, I assume?
Yes. A whole range of reforms are seen as having an impact. Things like the goods and services tax, the GST.
Which was a massive overhaul.
Huge. And the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, the IBC, making it easier to resolve failed businesses, plus corporate tax cuts, and then big infrastructure pushes like PM Gati Shakti, the National Infrastructure Pipeline.
Atmanirbhar Bharat as well, self-reliant India.
Right. All aimed at improving the ease of doing business, encouraging investment, capital formation.
Didn't Amitabh Kant also mention some specific economic indicators pointing to this strength?
He did, yeah. He highlighted things like record GST collections recently, GDP growth staying above 8% for the last 3 quarters.
Which is very high.
Very high. Also, the increasing use of the Indian rupee for trade settlements with, I think, 27 countries now, and keeping inflation relatively manageable, so several positive signal.
Now, when we throw around terms like GDP, it's probably worth just quickly clarifying what we mean. The Nexty IAS article had a good definition, didn't it?
It did. It's important to distinguish between nominal GDP and real GDP.
Okay, so nominal is?
Nominal GDP is the total value of everything produced in a country measured using current market prices. So the prices prevailing right now.
Which means it includes the effect of inflation, right?
Yeah.
If prices go up, nominal GDP goes up, even if you didn't actually produce more stuff.
Exactly. It's the headline figure, the one we're talking about with the $4.19 trillion, but it can be pushed up just by rising prices.
Got it. And real GDP?
Real GDP adjusts for that inflation. It measures the value of goods and services using constant prices from a specific base year. So it gives you a much better sense of the actual volume increase, the real growth in production over time.
Understood. So while India passing Japan in nominal terms is the big news story, it's that underlying real growth, adjusted for inflation, that's really driving this shift in the rankings over the longer term.
Precisely.
Okay, let's pivot then to the relationship with Japan. They were holding that 4th spot just before this, weren't they?
Yes, the CII report mentions Japan's GDP in 2022 was about US $4.23 trillion. So they were 4th then. But, these rankings are always a bit fluid, depends on growth rates, exchange rates.
Of course. And the connection between India and Japan, it's pretty deep, isn't it? It goes way beyond just trade figures.
Oh, absolutely. The CII report really emphasizes the long-standing diplomatic and economic ties. They even elevated the relationship back in 2014 to a special strategic and global partnership.
Sounds comprehensive.
It signals a really broad and deep level of engagement between them.
And economically, how's the trade between them been looking?
Well, bilateral trade has grown. It reached around US $22 billion in the 2022-23 period. One point the report notes is that India's imports from Japan have actually grown quite a bit faster than exports recently, over 6.6% average annual growth.
Meaning the trade balance isn't in India's favor.
Right. India had a trade deficit with Japan of about US $11 billion in that year.
Okay. And what kind of things are they trading? What does India sell to Japan?
In 2022-23, India's main exports were things like organic chemicals, seafood, fish, crustaceans, machinery parts, vehicles, aluminium, iron, and steel products. A mix of things.
And coming the other way, what does India buy from Japan?
Top imports from Japan were lots of machinery, inorganic chemicals, electrical equipment, iron and steel, copper, plastics. Again, a fairly diverse range, maybe leaning more towards capital goods and industrial inputs.
Seems like a pretty established trade relationship across different sectors.
Yeah.
What about investment? Japan's always been a big investor in India, hasn't it?
A very significant one, yes. Japan is a crucial source of FDI for India. The CII report puts the cumulative FDI from Japan between April 2000 and December 2023 at over US $41 billion.
Wow. Which makes Japan
the fifth largest source of FDI for India overall.
And where does that money typically go? Which sectors?
Key areas are the automotive sector, obviously, electrical equipment, telecoms, chemicals, financial services, especially insurance and pharmaceuticals, too.
And you can actually see Japanese involvement in some really big, visible projects in India, can't you?
Absolutely. The report highlights several major ones: the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, the DMIC.
Huge project.
Massive. Then there are the Japanese Industrial Townships, JITs, set up specifically to help Japanese companies invest. The Mumbai-Ahmedabad High-Speed Rail Project.
Bullet train.
That's the one. And significant contributions to developing the Delhi Metro over the years. These are really tangible symbols of that economic partnership.
So, okay, fast forward to today. India now has, nominally at least, a larger economy. How might this shift things going forward? The future implications, the opportunities, does it fundamentally change the India-Japan dynamic?
Well, first, while the growth is positive, the next TIS article is careful to point out the challenges India still faces, right? Things needed to make this growth sustainable.
Like what?
Things like navigating global geopolitical uncertainty that affects everyone, managing inflation pressures domestically, big challenges around employment, skilling the workforce adequately, tackling the trade deficit we just mentioned, and the constant need for more and better infrastructure. Growth puts demands on infrastructure.
Makes sense. You can't just grow without addressing those bottlenecks. And the next TIS article suggested a way forward.
It did. It stressed the need to diversify trade partners, keep strengthening domestic manufacturing, continue investing in digital transformation, and importantly, focus on sustainable policies, green growth.
Okay. So if we look at the India-Japan relationship through that lens, with India growing but facing these challenges, does the CII report suggest this changes things? Does it create new opportunities for collaboration?
Yeah, I think the perspective is that India's expanding economy actually creates more opportunities for Japan. The CII report points to various sectors.
Such as?
Well, in manufacturing, Japanese firms could potentially tap into those PLI schemes more. In infrastructure, huge needs remain: smart cities, more industrial corridors.
Yeah.
Renewable energy is another big one. Pharmaceuticals, electronics.
This is too. IT.
Absolutely. IT, business process management, tourism. The list is quite long, so it might be less about direct competition between India and Japan and more about maybe a recalibration, where Japan can act as a key partner and investor in India's continued growth and benefit from that growing market.
So not necessarily a zero-sum game where India's gain is Japan's loss.
Not necessarily, no. The idea is that Japan actually stands to benefit from increased investment opportunities in India's bigger, faster-growing market. And the CII report gets quite specific, pointing to areas like, advanced manufacturing, leveraging India's digital stack for collaboration, cooperation on skill development, maybe even labor mobility, and strategic areas like defense and aerospace, too.
So it sounds like a relationship that's maybe poised to evolve, to adapt to these new economic weights.
Precisely. The underlying partnership is strong, and this shift in economic size could actually unlock new, mutually beneficial ways for them to work together.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together then. India's climb to become the world's fourth largest economy. It's a really significant milestone.
Definitely.
Propelled by, strong domestic drivers like consumption and demographics, but also strategic investments, reforms, and maybe some favorable global realignments.
Right. But challenges remain, as we discussed.
Absolutely. Challenges persist. But this growth undeniably creates a whole host of new opportunities. And that's especially interesting when you look at it through the lens of India's long-standing and arguably increasingly important relationship with Japan.
Indeed. This isn't just about league tables. It reflects, real shift in global economic power dynamics. And that has real-world consequences for international partnerships, for investment flows, for future development.
And that leads us perfectly to our final thought for you, the listener. As we watch these major shifts play out, India rising, potentially Germany next, what new forms of collaboration and maybe even areas of, let's say, healthy competition might start to emerge, not just with Japan, but between India and other major global economies in the coming years?
Yeah. How will these changing dynamics reshape global trade, investment, and even geopolitics?
Definitely something worth keeping an eye on. Exploring that evolving landscape of global economics and these really crucial bilateral relationships is going to be fascinating.